Ready to learn how to swing the golf club better by one of the state's best. He's out at the Vanderbilt Legends Club at Walter. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Ned.
Welcome
Appreciate
back
you,
to
man.
the stage of the Nashville Golf Show.
It's been a year.
So you got all kinds of tools. You've got a swim paddle, some ropes,
A moving pad.
half a squishy ball.
Yeah.
We're ready to learn.
Oh yeah. Well, and part of today, in today's instruction is finding ways to entertain and amuse your clients, right? So part of coaching, in my opinion, is having not having training aids that are also called like assistive devices, right?
Okay.
So where we don't want the player to have to not learn, right? So if I give them something and it makes them do the motion, they're not learning, right? So I want them to learn the force because whoever's doing the work is going to do the learning. And that's a quote from one of my best coaches, John Dunnigan, right? And I've used it 1,000 times, that if I can teach a player how to create that motion or create that force, then they're going to learn it 10 times over. So for example, right, if you have that chicken wing arm at impact, right? And then you have the swing shirt that pushes your arms together, right? You're no longer learning, it's doing it for you. And actually what your arms are trying to do at that point are trying to separate. Whereas the tour striker ball, and I know you've seen that, right? The little noose looking thing that hangs down, where you're trying to squeeze the ball between your forearms. Now you're doing the work, right? So now you're doing the work, and now you're going to be trying to push your arms together. So it's kind of like that effect if you ever were a kid and you stood in the doorway and you put your arms on the outside and you kind of push as hard as you could to the outside, then you walked out and your arms started drifting and you started, and your mind was blown, right? So it's the same concept, right? So as soon as you get away from that training aid, your arms want to naturally push in this way because that's what they've been doing to hold the ball, right? So a lot of the fun toys I got down here are great ways and great examples to have that player learn the force or how to control force in the golf swing.
So let me ask you a question then. The putting arc,
Yeah.
that was popular. You don't see it as much on tour as you used to. Is that a good training aid to help us learn, or is it because that's there, it's actually doing the work for us?
It's great. So that's a great question, right? So it depends on where you're at in the learning development phase, right? So if you have no concept of what an arc is or how to move the putter, that can be very beneficial. Now, if it becomes to something where you're addicted to it and you can't make a stroke without it, or your first takeaway is all of a sudden you hit yourself in the right toe, right? Yeah, it's being too much of an assistive device at that point, right? So it's knowing when you need, like, again, this is kind of like where that assisted device and then having the player learn that motion. And it kind of goes back, you hear people talk about like block practice and random practice, right? Or variable practice. This is a thing. This is a thing. And part of a group of coaches I'm with, if you're asking that question, you're asking the wrong question, right? It's not a matter of block or random. It's on the sliding scale of in between. So who needs...
Explain block practice real quick.
So block practice is if I took this sweet Homa 7-iron, there's a plug for you, Klinger, and just hit 7 irons for an hour straight, right? That'd be block. Okay? And if I was doing... There's a difference between random and variable, but if I was going to hit a driver and then hit a 7-iron and hit a wedge and back to my driver and then back to a 3-wood, that'd be more of a variable practice. Now, where you run into an issue is, let's say you know what's coming next, it's no longer really random at that point, right? So it's kind of like in a deck of cards, you're down to 2 cards, you know what your odds are of picking those 2, right? So there's difficulty in making practice truly random, right? Now, if I stand up there in front of the tee in front of you and say, all right, here's your 7-iron, here's your driver, right? Then it's completely variable and random to you. So where that lies on the scale is kind of where you are as a golfer, right? So block practice is still very beneficial for beginners and people who do not have the skill sets yet. So they're still developing skills, still developing talent. Block practice is still really good for you. If you can't set up the same way every single time with your 7-iron, then you should probably still practice that. Right, but if you're
practice anyway.
Yeah, sure, right. Setup, grip, alignment, posture, all that good stuff, right? So, but then if you're a more developed golfer and you have that like I can't take it to the track problem, right? Well, then now you can start talking about more of that variable side of practice, right? But again, it's not either or. There's a good side of both. So even good players still need block, right? And like when you played, right, you still threw a alignment stick on the ground on the range, 100%. Still hit with the target, right? So it still comes back to having some block in your practice routine. So it just kind of goes into that phase of things when it comes to practice, right? So some of the toys that I use in the Bay is to help players develop their skill sets faster, right? And then part of me as a coach is I'm a firm believer that if you're guessing, you're doing your players a disservice, right? So I run a radar, I got force plates, I got sensors all over the place, right? We can pretty much measure anything you want in the dojo, as you said.
It's so intriguing because of the empirical data that you produce. You don't have to guess.
Right.
And golf is a hard enough game as it is. If we can eliminate a lot of the guessing, when we're learning, then we can learn in a much more efficient manner.
Absolutely. And so, TrackMan was kind of like the forefront like 5 or 7 years ago with ball data, club data, and that blew a lot of people's minds. Now we have pressure plates we put on people's feet. Now you're having a whole lot of talks about what should that look like, how your pressure should use the ground, how you should use pressure against the ground, right? And that's a whole nother discussion that people are starting to get their eyes open to. But one of the things I want to stress upon technology and where people kind of get themselves hung up is we want to compare ourselves to tour averages, right? And Dr. Scott Lynn made a great comment this past year when I was at Education. He said, if you're doing averages and you don't have the standard deviation, it means nothing.
Okay,
so a standard deviation is like how far from the mean things can spread, right? So for example, when we talk about lead foot pressure, right? So when I'm talking with my left foot, how hard do I push with my left leg into the ground to create force, to create speed? If you would look at Justin Thomas's lead foot pressure at impact, it would read 0 because his left foot's off the ground.
Of course, right.
Right? But what has everything been preached for the last however many years, right? Get on your left side, get on your left side.
Sure.
And everybody was in that 80 model going back and then 80% or 100% on your left side going forward. Well, Justin Thomas would fall in that arena where you just screwed him up.
Yeah,
right?
You would never heard of Justin Thomas.
It's right. He's still being Kentucky. So, and so if you looked at that averages, the averages still kind of show that 70% on that left foot is where most tour players are at impact, but Justin Thomas sits in that outlier mode where he's at 0, right? And so that would really screw the data. So when we look at technology and information, we have to be very careful as to what we're looking at and how is it, how tight is the correlation. So one of the things I want to talk about today, right, was people always ask, how can I hit it farther? Okay, so I'm going to give you two options, right? Because you're a smart guy, you went to Vandy. Okay, if I'm at the top of my backswing and I added 4 inches to my hand travel, okay, or if I added 30 degrees of angle in my wrist, which one would produce more speed?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm going to say the arm travel versus the wrist.
Correct. So if I want to hit the ball farther, if I move my hands 4 inches longer in the golf swing, albeit up or around, I can add 2.5 miles an hour to my club head speed. If I add 30 degrees of angle in the shaft, I'm adding 0.2 miles an hour in club head speed.
And a lot of inconsistency.
That's right. So this does nothing for speed production, but this does a lot.
But it's
right?
so much easier to use your
yeah, we want to, right? We want to just throw the crap out of it. So again, there's a lot of good research happening around in the smarter minds than I. My Mississippi State education limited me in that, but I love this school. But so having these smart minds that can spend time to research stuff, that's stuff that's important to me as a coach, because now, whereas maybe before I might have told that person, this is important, that's not important at all. Right, and there's actually a lot of great coaches out there that kind of teach keeping this out of the game. You kind of have that Stricker look, right, or the Bryson DeChambeau look, right, where they don't necessarily have a ton of angle coming down, but they maintain it really well, right? And so that's where a lot of coaches can benefit from this stuff too. I think it's a lot of great info.
Drive yesterday,
it's huge.
Riviera, longest drive of the day on the 17th hole, I think, at Riviera yesterday on the PGA Tour event. Bryson hit it. It was 20 yards farther than the next guy.
Yeah, the game's getting crazy in the distance arena, but I think the funny part is the USGA is trying to fight it, right? But that's another argument for another day.
That's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, we're not going down that road.
We're better at golf.
That's right.
We can hit it farther.
That's right.
So be part of that conversation.
I love having players that can have that conversation, right? So there's 4 things that I do for every player that comes into the studio, right? And we've talked about this in the past, last year when I was here, right? But I do screens, right? So if I'm the anti-guess measure player, right? So I want to know what is your height and wingspan relationship, right? So how long are your arms in relation to how tall you are? Because that's going to tell me where you need to plane the golf club, right? So if you have really long arms, okay, so your wingspan is longer than your height, you want to go more up. And if your arms are really short, you want to go more low towards your hip plane, right? That's where you see guys with the shorter arms staying down lower towards their butt plane or whatever. And if you have players that are mismatched and you're trying to get somebody with long arms really low, you're going to really mess them up, right? They're going to slow down, they're going to have some inconsistencies. But then also, if you have somebody with really short arms, you just give them back problems, right? Because if somebody has short arms and they try and get the club down from up here, the only way they can do that is recruit some spine, right? So again, it's very important to know these kinds of things. The second screen I'll do is we measure how long your forearm is to your upper arm. That allows me to know the downswing plane a little bit better too.
Okay.
So if you have a longer forearm, you're going to be the guy that planes the golf club a little bit over your elbow. And if you have a shorter forearm, you're going to be the guy that planes it a little bit underneath your elbow coming down, right?
And these are facts. These aren't suspicions or some.
It's what has to happen.
That's right. These are all physical.
Yeah. And I'm not taking any credit for this stuff too. I've learned it from Mike Adams and E.A. Tischler, who have the years of experience behind it. They're the one that passed it on to me. And it's improving my coaching, I'll say that, because now I don't guess at anything.
Yeah,
I can
way
measure
more
it.
efficient.
Right. So then another element is how much can your trail arm rotate, right? So I'm very limited in my ability to rotate my forearm back over. So I play what would be deemed a stronger grip because of that, because my forearm can rotate well to the right, but I can't rotate very far to the left, right? Where yours can get kind of back to flat.
Do yours again on that side? Are you kidding me?
Right?
What's wrong with me or what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with
here?
Something's wrong with me. Believe me, you're way more put together, right? So that's three, right? So you got wingspan to height, you got forearm to upper arm, you got trail arm, and then you have pivot types, right? And you've watched plenty of tour golf that know that there's plenty of ways to pivot in a golf swing and be effective, okay?
Yeah.
So you have players that can pivot to the right and get their turn. You have players like Zach Johnson that pivot more to the left, or Bryson DeChambeau. They get that much more leftward pivot with their lower body. And then there's the center guys that are more your Tiger Woods.
How do we determine what we are?
So when we do that, the best one I found, there's two ways to do it, but the best one I like is you can get a player out in the helicopter position is what I call it. Give them a little squat and then rotate. And when you watch my hips stay much more center to maybe even front.
Yeah.
And you'd have some players that give it the turn to the right. Now, we're not trying to make a golf swing. We're just trying to twist, right? So we want to see how much they actually twist.
We've got to try it, right? So we get in our golf posture, or we
Yep.
just
Stand straight up, getting a little squat like you're going to do. There you go.
squat.
Perfect. And then just give me a backswing turn to 90.
Here?
Yeah, this is perfect, right? Do that again and square up to the stage so everybody else can kind of see it. There you go. All right.
Just a little squat.
Yep, and then turn.
And then just turn.
Right? And so you're definitely center, maybe even a little forward to center.
Maybe even a little that way.
Yep. And there's a good test for that too, and I was hoping I could run TrackMan today. That'd be kind of fun. But what you can do is, if you have the ability to look at the data again, right, you can take the player and have them stand with their feet together, which most people would think that's the fastest way I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay in balance, I'm going to move it the fastest, and that's not necessarily true, okay? So for a player that's a more centered pivot, they can stand here with their feet together and hit golf shots, and we're trying to hit it with some speed, right? We're not just kind of putzing around. We want to move it with some motion. And if they do well there, they're more of a center pivot, right? And then you could have golfers that you pick up the right foot off the ground and have them hit from their front foot. You can do that. And that's another one where people kind of think I should be good from. I want to get to my left side.
Yeah.
That should be beneficial. Well, then I have players that can hit it unbelievably well off their right foot with their left foot off the ground. So that'd be your right pivot player.
And define good in this sense. Is it just measured on
Better
speed?
balance, better speed.
Okay.
So their head stays more stable and their speed goes up. And speed production goes up right now.
Okay.
And so there's not, so that's, we go back to that sliding scale thing, right? There's not, so if I do this with my left foot and test my left leg, that's a true forward pivot.
Okay.
Now we can test multiple areas by going
Now we're
here.
splitting hairs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can go inch by inch by inch and test how much closed. Like, so Hogan had a closed stance with driver, right? And then you have Sergio Garcia that plays a very open stance, right? To allow for how much lag he's coming into the golf ball, right? So by having an open stance, he's buying himself time.
And is this the things they did naturally over the course of time they just found work for them because of their physique?
Sure. And yes and no, right? So some players done it despite their effectiveness, right?
Sure. Okay.
And then you have other players who, all right, so I have a great example, right? So Kuchar can actually swing the club 12 miles an hour faster than he does. But he won't because he's afraid of going left. Because he doesn't want to hit it left, he plays his little wimpy cut, and you look at his bank account and he says, you know what, you're good, you keep your card next year, right?
Turns out he make a lot of money.
That's right. So because he doesn't want to hit it left, he'll never put that in play until he trusts it not to go left, right? So and then another example would be your Kyle Berkshire, right? What's his club head speed at, like 148?
Yeah,
Something
just
stupid?
a long drive guy.
Yeah, long hair, long drive, I guess must be a thing now, right? But maybe you have to have it. Maybe I need to start growing this out.
I think that passed us by.
Right?
Or we
So,
passed it by.
I don't know, man. I'm 31. I got a chance. Anyway, so Kyle Berkshire, right? He goes at 148. Well, if he walked into your studio swinging 125, you'd be sitting there looking at an athlete going, man, this guy can move it, right? But what if it's the wrong way? What if 125 wasn't his max, which it's not, right? He can move it at 125 with a forearm, right? So that's a different animal that if he came in at 125 with driver and you think that's really good, but then you look at some things, you look at some measurements, and you can look at the data and go, he's not efficient. He's getting this done while he's not efficient. And then, kudos to Bernie Najar, who's gotten him up to almost 150 now and in the same ball speeds, and Kyle's probably going to be the next, Jason Zuback or, whoever in the long drive world. But, so again, it's one of those things that, yes, there's our players that have done a lot of this stuff naturally, but then a lot of players that have been good and have gone away from good, when they get that data or those screens back and they go, oh man, when I was hitting it really great, yeah, I did do that.
That's right.
And you get that conversation, you're like, oh yeah, that light bulb, but who told you not to do that, right? Because that's not you.
It was the right way to do it.
That's the big problem, right? Is there's the perception of what is right. And one of the best compliments I ever got, and like you said, I teach a lot of junior golf, is I had a parent, and at the time it was a Sneds event. I can't remember which one it was last year, but 6 out of the 10 players were mine in the top 10, right? And it was actually a really good event because it stayed that way. But the parent went down the range and said, I could tell who is your student by the sound of the ball strike, not by the golf swing. And that was a big compliment to me, because I don't want my players to I don't want people to walk down the range and go, that's a Matt Walter golf swing.
Right.
If people are recognizing my players' golf swings, I've done a bad job as a coach, right? And so, but to hear the sound, the sound was recognizable, that's when, it was a big compliment for me, I felt like. But yeah, so we have those 4 tests, right? So that's where I like to screen players. And so, like you already said, I have this awesome little toy. It's called a fish paddle, right? A swimmer's paddle. You can apply this to the back of the hand, right? And once I screen a player for how their trail arm should work, right? Where a lot of people have a misconception is that, we are pulling on the golf club through the impact, but it can be to a detriment, right? And if I pull too hard with the golf club, we can get that El Hazel shot, or we can leave it out to the right. So there has to be some influence with our trail hand as well, and that's where having it in the right place, but also applying the right force can help. And so, like I said, I play from more of an understyle grip, so I would take that paddle and put it more underneath the golf club, and my goal would be to keep pushing against the side of the shaft with that paddle to learn how that is created.
If I do it wrong, what does it look like?
Well, the golf club would come off of the paddle, right? So if I pull too hard with my left and I didn't apply an equal force with my right, I would be sliding the paddle off, or the golf club off of my paddle, right?
And you can't keep your right hand on it because the force is too great.
Yeah, because one's beating the other, right? So it's not an equal balancing equation. And that's something I like to tell my players too, is a lot of people come in and say, I'm tired of the hook, right? And right? But then some people look at it as like, what can I take out of my swing to not hook it? And I look at it from, what can I put in your swing to not hook it? Because if I'm looking at it as a total force equation, if I take something out, you now can't swing as fast. And that is not as good or as much fun if you hit it shorter and crooked, as Tiger Woods back in 2005, how that went, right? I guess maybe 2008, 2009, 10, something like that, right? But if I can take it and add force production, now we can go faster, we can be in more control, and we can still be accurate. Yeah, that's fun. Golf's fun when you go fast. Yeah, sure, right? So, exactly right, right? And so different players match up to different screens. So like more people might be on top, some people might be more on the side or underneath, and we would just match them up to that.
And this is all done in the evaluation of all the 4 aspects that you talked about.
Correct, right? And that allows the player, in that sense, to learn how to apply a good force against each other, right? And then another way we can feel it out is we can just have them swing with one hand and just make little half swings through here. And if it's too far under or too far on top, the player will actually tell you that the golf club's traveling, the face is more open, the face is more closed. It doesn't feel like the face is staying more square. And that's really what your right hand's doing, is allowing you to manipulate some path and face equations.
Yes, right.
And your left hand is more matching up to how fast you're producing hips from the hip speed into the ground.
Interesting.
Right, so that's a lot of fun. Now here's a little great toy before we start getting people up here as victims for the day. This is a great little toy that my buddy Tischler came up with, and I've kind of made my own little version of it because I was his labor force one night. So this is the Tischler rope, and so what you can do with this rope is it allows the player to learn how to create the right amount of force through the swing, but also create good dynamics, good balance, stability, right? And if you're a player that kind of like early casts that thing, getting a rope, letting it fold up onto your shoulder, and then learning how to generate that first little pull down can really help get that feeling of how to create the mysterious lag everybody's looking for, right?
And get it on the right plane.
Yeah, and that's
for me,
right, and that's something I've noticed too when players do this and they have good dynamic posture, good balance, that they instantly start throwing this thing up on their natural plane because manipulation's not there. They're not trying to manipulate the rope like they're trying to manipulate a golf club, and that goes into a whole nother mental part called intent, right? You know, what's your intention in your golf swing, right? If you ask a tour player, do you think about hitting a golf ball? No, they don't think about that. They think about hitting a shot, right? But they're not going to think about hitting a ball. They're not worried about that. That's long gone, right? And so their intent's different than most amateurs, right? And their intention of how they're going to move that golf club is different. And so this takes away that fear of hitting a golf shot poorly and allows them to focus on better intentions.
So in theory, if you film somebody swinging the rope, that would be their natural arm path, body rotation.
Yeah, most of the times they find themselves doing that on their own without me having to manipulate it, right? Now, some of them might be so ingrained, the hardest thing for them to do is unlearn the bad stuff, right? That could be.
I could see that. Yeah.
You know, if you have years of doing it one way, it could definitely be to a detriment, you know, that you have to unlearn it, right? So there's a lot of fun toys. Like I said, I have a movers pad up there. The moving pad's a lot of fun too. This was a $10 Amazon purchase and it comes with two, so I'll let somebody buy the other one from me if they want. But if you're one of those guys that complains about swaying to the right, you put this underneath your right foot and I dare you to sway and see if you still have groin flexibility, right? So if you get set up here and you put this underneath your right foot and you're a swayer of the golf ball, that thing is going to slide off to your right and it's going to learn, again, this is how like learning how to create force is important, because you'll learn to push down on your hip instead of pushing to the right, right? I mean, that's something that a lot of people confuse, right? And one of those golf myths is weight is not pressure.
This is a whole, go ahead, the floor is yours. Weight is not pressure.
Right, so my weight can't change, right? Unless I go to McDonald's and eat 4 double cheeseburgers, right?
Can do.
Yep, which is not out of the question, right? And me, you, and Verge can go sit down and knock that out real quick, okay? So weight's not going to change. Now the pressure in my feet can change, right? So that's what long drive guys do very well, is that they create massive pressure changes, very fast, very violent, and we can measure those things now. And what we're seeing is these guys can apply over 250% of their body weight in a golf swing, right? And for those that don't know, that's a truckload, okay? Most tour players hover around about 140 average for all three of the main forces we use in a golf swing. So your lateral slide, your rotational, and your verticals, right? As long as you can be, you know, middle of the road on all three of those, you're doing pretty good. Usually we have one that stands out, but you don't have to be the best at all three, okay? Now usually long drive guys are there maxing out all three, right? But for us, right, learning how to create a pressure shift, I mean, when I do this, right, I'm changing pressure in my feet from right to left. I can sit here and do this between my 2 feet, and if you're watching it on a pressure plate, you'd see my pressure violently going back right and left, right and left, right and left. My weight never changed, right? And my weight didn't have to move. My mass didn't have to move to create that, right? And so that's where a lot of players get themselves in trouble, is that when they get to the top, or right before they get to the top, they try and throw their mass left, right? Well, now I got a lot of mass on my front foot, and now it's a lot harder for me to use that, right? Versus if I stay here and I push down with my left leg, there's less mass over my left leg, but now I can start to create a violent torquing and twisting.
If I get in this position,
right, you can already feel how there's more pressure onto your quad, into your calf.
To undo that takes
a lot more effort.
More work, and it actually is going to slow.
Yeah, slow a lot of things down, right? And that's where you see a lot of early flips, a lot of early pushes. So I have a thing called a force pedal. It's a lot of fun, but you can get a tennis ball too. The thing that's great about this is it has that pattern underneath, so things kind of stay a little more put together and doesn't collapse. But just by sheerly learning how to create a push off of your lead toe, and typically where we're looking to create that push is somewhere what we call a transition, right? It's a very vague term in the golf world, but basically you can kind of coin it from when your left arm hits parallel in the backswing to your left arm kind of returns in the downswing. Okay. You can call that transition if you want. And depending on the type of player you are, right, getting there sooner could be better, getting there later could be better. Just kind of depends, right? there's different windows we want to do all this stuff. But when you get to the top, if you could feel how to create a push down, not to the left.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different in terms of
sliding.
This.
Yep.
Versus.
Right.
Yeah, totally different.
Right, and so the best thing about some of this stuff is when I push against that, it pushes back into me, and it allows me to start to learn how to create that turning and twisting motion, right? And so that's kind of where I tell a lot of people this one too, right? If you think about a bottle cap, and we're talking about turning, right? I wouldn't take a bottle cap, actually, throw me that, here we go, that water bottle. I wouldn't take a bottle cap and push on it this way to open it.
I'd like to watch though.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Keep doing that.
Right? So what has to happen is, and this one's not cracked yet, so I'm not going to show how strong I am, but you would push on equal opposite ways this way to create that twisting motion, right? So when I do that,
yep.
My one finger's pushed that way, and my thumb's pulling back against it, and that's how we're creating a turning motion. And so when I'm doing that in a golf swing, and if anybody's ever had their right foot slip on them in the downswing, right? That's what's happening, right? I'm creating force and production to create my hip to go, but the funny part is the force is being applied in the opposite direction, right? So that's why when I'm pushing in the downswing to go this way, my right foot slips back. My right foot doesn't slip forward, right?
Sure.
So that's one of those like,
right,
yeah, right? You never think of
it. That's commonsensical, but at the same time.
Well, I'm glad you figured out that fast, because I spent a year on that one.
Well, right. When you explain it so easily, well, okay, well, that does make sense.
But then,
think about it,
for those that can't get the turn in the backswing, right, the common flaw is like, what do you hear? Like, turn your hips more, right? That's the most vague term ever to be said ever. Like, turn your hips more. Great. In which direction? Or how much? To what extent?
And how?
Yeah, right? Exactly. So, but if I tell you to try and push into this like force pedal with my left foot, right, and I try and push that way, by pushing that way, I'm pushing my hip back.
Oh, yeah, you are.
So if I try and slide my foot forward that way, it's going to push my hip to go backwards, and now I gain a lot of hip turn. And by the way, your right leg can straighten in the backswing. That's allowed, right? I don't like the whole.
As well.
Yeah, to keeping your knees straight or flex in the backswing drives me nuts.
If you go back and look at the old schoolers, Bobby Jones and Hogan and Hagen and
Nicholas,
they all got straight
Trevino.
Right,
yeah, just chalk it up to anybody that was good.
Anybody that was good. Pressure and weight, again, different elements. Of
right, exactly, right. So again, that was another big myth buster. Is like, you know, and I love busting those myths, right? And it's like one of those like. You start asking the right questions, players kind of put themselves in their own hole when they have to like try and explain their way out of it, right? And it's just like, yeah, talk me through that one.
Keep going.
You just keep shoveling, right?
I think we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, right. And that, you know, that's where it comes down to preference too, right? I think the biggest threat from coaching to, you know, from playing to coaching and influencing others is like you have to be able to take your own preference away. And if you have your preference being applied and your preference is not necessarily jaded, but if your preference is like, everybody needs to look this way, you're going to be good at teaching about 20% of the population, and then everybody else is going to struggle, right? And that's one of those deals that, you know, measuring helps avoid that situation, right? So who wants to be a victim for today? And I'll do a quick little screen. Yeah, eager? Yeah, man, he's going to jump.
He's ready to go.
He is way more athletic than I am. All right, so here's the best thing I keep in my pocket all the time when I'm teaching is a tape measure, right? You know what's best about this tape measure? It's got a bottle opener on the back for after I'm done teaching. 5 o'clock comes real quick at the end of the tee. All right. So how tall are you?
5'11".
Okay. Any injuries?
No.
No. Good. What's your handicap?
4.
4? Oh, good player. I like it. Cool. All right. So go wings out. Good. Perfect. All right. Ned, if you could be the dummy end for me real quick. Hold that right at the end of his fingertip.
Got it.
Pull your palm up this way for me. Right. So you said you're 5'11", right? And that's your wingspan, right? So you're even. Okay. My wingspan's an inch long. Right? And just, I'm going to put you off to the side. I'm going to measure Ned's here real quick. Let's see if he's got short arms and why he couldn't have a basketball career. Right? I'm going to let you be the dummy end for me real quick again, sir. What was your name again?
Gary.
Gary? Perfect. How tall are you, Ned?
6 foot.
He does have short arms. I called it. He's 5'11".
Yep.
Right? So he's got an inch short, right? So you got 3 different players up here already, right?
Yep.
I'm an inch long, you're an inch short, and you're even, right? So we're all going plane on different planes, right? So coming down even, right? If we chunked our body into thirds, okay, you can go from the shoulder to kind of like mid-bicep to kind of like through the elbow, and then below the elbow down to kind of like the belt buckle, right? So you have 3 different thirds. With an even, you kind of be in that torso plane, right? So you'd be playing much more through the core. I'm coming in a little bit higher through the bicep-ish area, and then Ned's kind of where he's always been, kind of hugging his butt as he's coming down through the golf swing, right?
Not always. It took a lesson with you to realize, oh, okay.
All right, so now we're going to test his forearm and upper arm, right? So what I want you to do is make a fist with your trail arm, just your trail arm, right? Perfect. Bring your elbow down to your side for me. Good. Now turn this way so everybody can see. Okay. Now straighten out your hand. There you go. Good. Now what we can look at is we're going to go from his middle knuckle to his elbow, and his elbow to his shoulder joint, right? And we kind of look at those lines, right? It already kind of looks like his forearm might be a little longer than his upper arm, right? But this can be deceiving, so that's why we measure, right? So we go from shoulder to elbow, that's 14. We go knuckle down there, and that's 15 1/4, right? So this is longer than that, right? So that's going to steepen the plane coming down a little bit, right? So a better plane for you is going to be coming just a little bit above your elbow, right, when you're coming in. If you start to try and get it this way too much, you're going to get into that handle draggy, relying on a lot of turn, late release, maybe a quick hook every once in a while kind of move, right? So we don't want to do that, right? Real quick, we'll screen for that trail arm motion, right? So what I want you to do is get in your golf posture for me, put your hands together like that. That way we're kind of more of a golf swing. So let's see, left hand on top, right hand down there. Yep, don't need to take your grip, just palm to palm. Perfect. Just like that.
Gotcha.
There you go. Okay. Now, when you make this backswing, right, you're not trying to make a golf swing for me. What I want you to do is just simply slide your left arm across your chest and let your right arm fold and just do it whatever comes naturally. So just go ahead and take it on back. Good. Nope, nope. Not a golf swing. Relax.
Okay, sorry.
Just slide your left arm and let that fold.
Okay.
There you go. Good. Perfect. Do it again. Back down. Okay. Perfect. Good. Now let's turn this way so everybody else can see. I already know what you're going to be, right? So before we do this, right, your trail hand and your elbow don't always align. People try and manipulate it. Not saying you do, okay? But you got a little nervous here for a second.
Try not to.
But that can play into how we deliver, right? So we want to know where the elbow is in relation to the body, as well as where your palm faces in the backswing, or in that little backswing model, right? So again, just try and keep your shoulders calm. Let your left arm slide, your right arm fold. Good, okay? And so now when we look at it, right, you can see his trail arm goes back. Let this fold a little bit for me. There you go, right? So his trail arm slides back a little bit. So this would be like kind of the center where the seam on your shirt is. Elbow's deep, and his palm sits kind of neutral, right? So that's where he kind of sits in between a player that would be on top and side, right? Because his trail arm's going deeper than what his palm wants to do, right? So his palm will want to be more this way, I bet, you know, given the circumstances, right? So go ahead and relax for me. And I'll tell you what we'll do first. Ned, you might be in the danger zone. I'm going to have you step onto the stairs real quick. There you go. Perfect. All right, so what I want you to do for me is I want you to make small little half swings, okay? And what we're going to do is, right, so if you had a paddle here, right, you would be, instead of just straight on the side, you'd be a little touch over, right? So maybe that kind of crease points up to your left shoulder a little bit, not all the way over. But I want you to try a few different positions just to tell me what you feel different, right? So right hand only.
Oh, right hand up.
Yep, yeah, that's your right. Good job. You already passed the first test. Okay. Twist it just a little bit.
Okay.
Good job. Choke down to where your right hand would normally go. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. And just, yeah, we're good. So half back, half through. Try not to manipulate it much. Just give it a little speed, right? Swing back and through. No pauses. Just keep moving. Keep moving. No pausing. There you go. Tell me what the club face is doing. Feel kind of square?
Square.
Does it feel like it's going left or right?
Square.
Okay, good. Stay there. Now, what happens when I do that?
Oh, see, I'm going to start hooking.
Maybe. The face didn't get too shut on that one. But where did the club start to travel? More to the right? Right? So we started influencing path, so that might be more of the reason why it would go into hook mode. Okay, so set up again. And if we go crazy on top, tell me what happens again. Does it feel like it goes a little more left?
Yep.
Yep, right? Now, go ahead and relax for me, Gary. You're doing good, man. You're you're flying colors right now, okay? So typically, right, and like in your case too, right, you can tell there's still some manipulation going on, right? You're wanting it to do something, okay? And so if I take your trail hand and told you, like, the more you played on top, okay, the more your trail hand would work up and out, right? So we would have more of a hinge going this way, okay? Now, if your right hand's underneath, you're obviously not going to hinge that way, right? So we're going to require a little more left hand action in hinging the golf club, okay? But since you're kind of more of what I would call like a side cover golfer, right, where your trail hand would sit just a touch over on the top, right? Yep, we would see a hinge that kind of goes up a little more, right, and a little quicker, right? So you might be a little more narrow taking it away. You might go up a little bit more in that transition, right? So knowing that, right, I want you to slide on this paddle, right? And we're just going to have a little bit of fun again. Yeah. See, I probably need to tighten it up just a little bit, but see how that goes for you. 4 fingers through there. Good job. Slide that there. Perfect. Right? So now, hold it with your left hand. And just come towards me a little bit just to give yourself a little room to swing. There you go. Perfect. Right? So now, we're going to take this hand. That's about where you would play it from. Okay? I want you to try and keep constant pressure on your right hand against the shaft, and don't let this come off of the golf club, making little half swings for me. A little bit bigger than that. Good. Now, where is your palm face when you finish right now? When you get to that halfway point, where's your right palm going? Yep. The first couple were actually a little more underneath, right? So I want you pushing a little harder with that, and I want you to feel like if this was a corner, I want you to try and turn that corner a little more with that left hand, okay? So a little more on top. There you go. Take it back. Good. Ned, you see how that goes up, and now that one went a little more left. There you go. Feel the difference? Good. There you go. Now give me a little bit of speed. I think you're holding back on me a little bit. All right, same size swing, right? So still half. There you go. Now, did you feel how the golf club wanted to slip away from you a little bit? Okay. Get that right hand involved some, okay? Keep, when you set here, push against each other. Good. There you go. Twist it over just a touch. Good. Keep that the same. Try to keep that the same as you go all the way through and see where that golf club goes. That probably went the most left, right? Right? And the more this hand takes over, the more this slides under, the more up you're going to finish as opposed to down and left. Does that make sense? Tracking me? Good. One more. Turn that hand on top again. Because even there, right, your first instinct is to do what?
Yeah.
Hold it there. It's there.
It's there.
Mm-hmm. That was left.
Yeah.
That was left, right? And so now you start to feel that exit, right? So what's the big miss you don't like to see? You like, yeah. Where do you like? You don't want the ball to go left. You don't want the ball to go right.
No, sometimes I hit it right.
Hit it right, so you lose it, right?
I
So
don't hook the ball left in.
sure, right? Here's a perfect example, right? There's your handle dragger, okay? And that kind of showed with every follow through that you were making. When you were getting that follow through, that paddle would end up underneath the golf club. That's this dominating that.
Yeah.
Right? And I bet you if you start to let that right hand work a lot more through the shot, right? Quote unquote a release through the hit,
That would help.
you would feel a much more of an, there's 3 different types of exits, right? You can extend down the line, you can kind of go around more, and then you can kind of post around your left toe almost, right? A hard left exit, right? Yours is kind of that gradual merge through the left lane, right? And right now you're trying to extend it up the line, right? Which is why everything's right and never going left.
That's it.
Right? So now if you can get that right hand on top working, right? Just because you put your hand on top does not mean it's going right. Okay? Now if you don't do anything with it, yeah, it's going to go right. Okay? So again, give me a hard push to that left hand. Feel like you're going to almost, don't do it, but feel like you're almost going to put it into that pipe. So scoot up just a little bit so you don't. There you go. Perfect. Much better exit, right? Feel it going that way? Good. Do it again. Good. All right, now let's do your pivot, right? So go ahead and take that paddle off for me. Okay? Now again, if I had a perfect world, we'd complete the test with hitting some shots, right? We don't want to bang things or whatever, right? So what I want you to do is get in golf posture, right? Or not golf posture, sorry. Stand up straight, arms out, little squat. So come up here on the mat. There you go. Perfect, right? Good. Now, just make a backswing turn, get your arms to 90 from where you're at right now. Perfect, right? So he stays a lot more centered, right? He tried to go right. That was his golfer showing up, right? Do it again. Reset. Twist. Yeah, he's actually even staying a little forward even that, right? So again, watch this, right? So if you were to pivot into your right side, you would be more there, right? That's how you started it, right? The first one, you wanted to go this way, and then when you actually twisted, you started to slot. Yeah, right? You started to find your spot. That's your pivot, right? And so that's where you would go, and I'm betting that's a lot more turn than you're probably putting in a real golf swing right now, right? Because that's where you naturally go. Now, the benefit part, you can relax. That's good, right? So you'd be much more of a center post, right? So you would want to look for, if you drew a line off your right leg, some separation, some gap, okay? You come down, you go up more through the torso in your plane. You come down just a little bit above that right arm. We'd want to feel that delivery going much more left, right? And then your pivot, let yourself stay centered in that twist, right? And when you let yourself turn here, you have a better chance to have better force production, okay? Because what happens is if you try to slide right, you're now delaying when everything else is going to happen, right? You've now affected the kinetic sequence, right? Because you slid too much this way, you'll have to manipulate a slide back in some point of your golf swing, right? And that's where timing starts to come into play, right? We don't want to time things, at least the best we can, right? So that'd be really good. So here, try this out for me real quick, because I'm just kind of curious, and I like messing with people all the time. This is what I do for fun, right? Grip that. Sorry, it's not a better grip. It's just duct tape. There you go. Perfect, right? So here's what you're going to do, right? Kind of like how I showed. Let this arm soften a little bit and let the rope fall here, okay? And then just swing it through one time for me to get a feel for the rope. Good, right? Feel that extend up? I don't want the extend up. I want the down left.
Down left.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
okay.
That's my big
Right,
problem.
so up on the rope. Good. And we'll get into like real golf swings, but for now we're just going to go up and pause. Let that soften up. Good. Okay. Down left. That was still up and away, right? Give me that left exit. I'm going to have Ned stand right there. And you
I'm standing left anywhere.
okay, good. Get my left exit. There you go. Now that one probably felt different going through the ball, didn't it, right? Good. Do it again. Set up. Give me like 2 more like that, and then I'll show you how we're going to do it with a real kind of like golf swing, right? More turn. Good. Left. Good. Excellent. Now, here's what we're going to do, right? I'm going to borrow the rope from you for a second, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to set up like an actual golf shot. Let it have some time to get up on your shoulder. Let it get soft, okay? So then it goes up, and then you're going to swing through, okay? So no pausing, no breaks. Make it feel more like a golf swing. And what I want you to focus on is that left exit in the downswing, right? Good. Go. As soon as that rope hits your back, go. Good. Do it again. Reset. That's right. So we got some bounce things going on. Good. Go. As soon as it hits your back, go. That was the up. Okay. Give me my left. Good. Left. That a boy. Feels faster that way too, doesn't it?
You get more club head speed that way, don't you?
Hopefully. That's the goal, right? Good. Up again. Good. Hit your back. Go. Good. Now, speed up the backswing just a little bit, right? So it feels more like a golf swing. There you go. Go. Good. Notice what his arms are doing, right? Kind of tracking right through the mid, right? That's why the rope's having a harder time get up on his shoulder because he wants to track it more through his torso. And then all the balance issues are coming right now because the minute he learns to go left, he'll stay in balance better.
Stay in balance.
Up. There you go. Less wiggly in the feet, right? Good. Up. Go. Excellent.
Tell me speed.
Here you go. I'll hold that. Right. And so you kind of get that feel, right? And so you never really got that swoosh sound, right, when you extended up the line because you had that dragging, right? Think of a whip. If this turned into a whip and I need it to snap, this has to stop so that that can go. If I just keep pulling on it, this never wins, right? So that's where it's slower, not as fast. And in your case, you said miss is right. There's your right, right? So all of that comes back to is maybe it's a little pivot issue. Maybe you get a little too far to the right and you get stuck, right? So then that glide, when we glide this way, that's going to delay a left release, right? So without actually seeing it hit golf shots, that'd be a guess too, is that in your backswing, if you go this way too far, you're going to have to make up for it. Well, now you just delayed when you can actually get to that left corner, right? So if we tighten that up a little bit too, and then let you learn how to go left, then things could really start to happen, right? So I don't know if that's going to help or not, but hopefully it does.
Thanks a lot, man.
You got it. Thanks for coming up and being a guinea pig, man.
Sure.
So I don't know where we're at with time there, Neto. How we doing, man?
I'm learning. I've stopped keeping track of time. You got 6 more minutes.
Oh, six more minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, man. What kind
That
of
was intriguing. I always find it so curious when you put people in the natural state of where their body's supposed to be, how immediately the speed picks up and then the balance is right there. And
Right.
you say when he got left, that one he just posted right up on it.
Right. And that's a great word to use, right? Post, right? We're posting into our left foot and we're posting up. And I love how that combination works into it too, right? Because basically that's what we got. We got 2 posts.
Right.
Okay. And so here's another great nugget, right? The stance width affects that greatly. So if I have a wider stance.
Yes, I was going to ask you about this. How do you determine
Stance width?
Yes.
So the first thing we could do, right, one is if you just kind of had a player bounce on their feet, right,
Yeah.
they're not going to jump out this way most of the time, right, unless you're like doing an overhead snatch or something crazy, right? So if I just kind of bounce here on the feet, I want to come to a pretty much natural width, right?
Yeah.
And from here, I can manipulate it a couple inches at a time depending on what I want, okay?
That's a good place to do it.
Yeah, if you close your eyes, bounce a few times, you can find a good place to go to start out with your bounce because you're going to find that natural point.
Will it also be, if after doing a few of those, if your left foot's in front of your right foot or your right foot's in front of your left,
Yeah.
is that naturally going to settle where you're supposed to be?
Yeah, if you look, mine dropped back an inch to
Right.
the right. I mean, that's kind of my normal playing stance, right? My right foot flares out and it goes back a touch.
Well, that's because you know.
Yeah.
You know, I always fought trying to be closed.
Sure.
And maybe that was what I needed to do.
Well, and so that gets to a good point because there's closed and then there's sheared, right?
Yeah.
I can shear my stance, right?
Okay.
And then I can twist
Yeah.
my stance, right?
Okay.
And so if I shear this way, I can still stabilize my pelvis, right, to stay square. Then obviously if I twist, now I've changed my pelvic and my shoulder alignments, right?
Yeah.
So there's a difference there in shearing and twisting.
And it used to be that it debunked this myth or solidify it for us, is that, and I still in the commentary will point it out, if you'll see a guy, Kuchar's probably the great example now, and he debunks the myth, but if your feet and your shoulders are pointed different directions, chances are you're going to hit.
But Kuchar also has a jacked up kinetic sequence. So we get back into that fade. His kinetic sequence is one of the only tour players, one of the very few tour players that doesn't go slide, turn, jump. I forget the exact order, but I want to say it's twist, slide, jump. So his is kind of actually messed up. So that you might be onto something, man. You might need to.
Whenever you see lines going different directions, normally that's not a good thing.
Correct. And so getting this, again, so if I look at an order of play of like what I care about with alignment, right? Club face first, because that's what hits the ball, right? Grip. How is the club face? Is the club face square to my grip, right? That's important. And then I go to shoulders, hips, and toes, right? Toes is the last thing I look at as far as is this an alignment issue from their toes pointing in a direction, right? Because I want to make sure they're pointing the face first. If they're pointing the face the right way, are they getting the club moving in their hands the right way, and then the shoulders in their hands? So if you think about it, it's just a kinetic chain at that point, right? From club to hands to shoulder to hips to feet.
So you start with the club and you go the opposite direction.
Yeah. So feet to me is the last thing I look at. And that, like I said, and usually I don't have to bug with it too much if I know, I know where their dynamic posture is, and then their pivot type. So if they're a more front pivot player, right, they can benefit from a right foot back stance. If they're more of a back pivot player, they can benefit from more of a back left foot stance. But the interesting stat was when Jason Day was playing his best, his stance width was 21 inches wide with his driver. Without naming names or anything like that, they added 4 inches of stance width to his driver stance, and he had back problems. That's why he's out.
What was the philosophy behind adding?
They just thought it was too narrow and thought
or it just didn't look right.
Keeping comments to the side, right? They added 4 inches to it, and what happened was he slid more, recruited more out of his lumbar spine, and jacked up his back.
And I saw some footage of that era recently where he would get here and the hands had to turn so fast.
Yeah.
And he always has such speed in his body.
Right. And so when
now you're ripping this back and something's got to turn.
Right. So when you add width, you add slide, right? Okay. And so if I add width here and then I produce slide, now I'm going to recruit more out of my back. And if I'm not made to do that and I need to post up sooner, right? And that's another big myth is you got to keep your butt on the line through the impact zone. That's not true, but I'm not advocating early extension by any stretch of the imagination. Hands up on that, right? Okay. But what I'm saying is if you're like an on-top golfer guy, right, and you have a lot of verticals, your butt is not going to stay back on that line. But if you're an under golfer who requires a lot of rotational stuff, right, and your elbow's driving in forward, you better stay back on that line if you wanted to keep it in play, right? So it kind of, again, goes back to matchups, right? Somebody with a stronger grip that can turn a lot, they're going to stay back there. Right. I got guys that can absolutely hit 300-yard bombs that aren't on the line at impact, right? So, if you start to back them up, bad things happen, actually. So
we're running out of time, but I have a question in terms of grip.
Yeah.
Again, I'll use myself as an example. I grew up playing tennis. I was always used to tennis grip.
Sure.
So when I started playing golf, I had mid-sized grips. So I had a bunch of tape on it.
Sure.
And over the course of my career, I went away from it, and it still feels too skinny for me.
Right.
So it may be that just how I evolved as a player, but Bubba Watson on his wedge has something like 14 wraps under his left hand.
Yeah, it's like 10 and 14, I think, something like that.
10 under his top hand.
Yeah.
Bryson DeChambeau has square grips.
Yeah, he's like jumbo.
And they're square.
Yeah.
Which is
bizarre,
but amazing, and that's why he's this wonderful, colorful guy on the tour. Mm-hmm. But how do you determine what grip is right?
So grip size. So Timmy over at West Haven did a great job of teaching me all that stuff, right? So we take your top hand and we measure it from the crease of the base of your hand to the end of your fingertip, and then how long your middle finger is or your longest finger, right? That gives you a good baseline, right? That doesn't mean it's the end all be all. It's like I know players that like to kind of add a couple other pieces of tape underneath or maybe take some out. It kind of depends, right? If you have, I think it matters too that if you have a guy, like you talked about Bryson having the massive grips and square grips, right? Well, what's his golf swing like? The most close you can get to a single plane motion that requires the least amount of hand action at the bottom, right? player like Sevi or Sergio that want the smaller, a little bit on that, not saying they're smaller, but smaller than his, that need more hand action, they probably want that ability to move the golf club, right? So there's a little bit of play there, but getting a good hand size to start with gives you a good baseline, and you can manipulate it. So I'm one of those freaks, again, courtesy of Timmy, that take all the taper out of my right hand, right? And I don't do the plus floor grip. I do it like a really kind of a special, unique way that takes the taper out, because I always felt like I had that Vijay Singh right hand kind of coming off the golf club feel. I took the taper out of my right hand, and my right hand stays on the club a lot better through impact, and I can control the face better.
So by taking the taper out, you put a couple of extra wraps.
Yeah, so I add a piece at 1 inch, 2 inch, 4 inches, and 6 inches, and then I build up to my grip size, and that takes the taper out, so my right hand's grip size is the same as my left hand grip size. So yeah, I get nerdy.
There's a lot
it's bad.
to this game.
Right? Then one real quick thing about posture, and then I'm going to be done. Right? So the easiest, fastest way to get in a good dynamic posture, right, is if you stand up straight, take your grip, hold the club straight out in front of you, right? Go ahead and get into a good squat, right? So none of this stuff, right? So get into a good squat. And where most people get it wrong is they'll try and pull the grip down towards their body, which is going to pull their chest forward. Let the club head fall first to shaft parallel, and then bring the club down, and that gives you a much better angle with your chest, right? And just yesterday, I had 2 people that were, when we did that, not on a golf ball, right? Like one was at 31 inches from the ball with their driver, the other one I think was like 32, but both of them set up 2 inches farther from the golf ball, doing it their way than where they would if they just set up what felt the most athletic, right? So they were trying to set up to the ball and not trying to create a posture and then walk into the golf ball, right? And so what happens is if I bend too far over with my chest, my shoulders get out over my toes too far, a lot of bad things happen, right? And so what I like to see is evenness between how much your shoulders are out and how much your hips are back. And if I could draw a line straight down, we're not heavily biased over our toes, a lot of good things can happen. So again, the real quick way is if I get set up, arms out in front, little squat, club goes down, bring the club to the ground, I have parallel forearms to my thighs, and that's when I know I'm in good posture, right? So if my forearms parallel my thighs, I can be dynamic and I can move however I need to move.
And I love the empirical nature of it. It's not we're guessing or we think. It's, we know to the inch.
Right.
To the
we try to.
fingernail.
Yeah.
This is, and at least it gives us the best chance.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the goal is most people are more athletic than they give themselves credit for. They're just set up in a way that doesn't allow them to be.
And then you lose speed.
That's right. Yeah, all kinds of, all the bad stuff. No fun.
Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Always,
appreciate you, man.
I'm going to have to get this knowledge just wiped off of me.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel when I go to these things.
You can find him at the Vanderbilt Legends Club.
Correct.
Where
or
else?
MattWalterGolf.com is my website, or MattWalterPGA on social media.
And plug your podcast, which is great.
Yeah, so I have a Junior Golf Blueprint podcast that is out every Friday morning, and we just launched. The episode's going for 2020, and we got a whole bunch lined up coming up, so it's going to be fun, man.
He's the man.